base, וקרקע אינה נגזלת. So Tosfot has a kloimar here. I mean, what is this? What's this kloimar? Kloimar is that it's not the simple understanding. So the simple understanding is that you can't steal land. Tosfot doesn't mean it can't steal land. It's that it's eina kinyan legazlan b'shum yeush. So when it means that kark is eina nigzeles, saying that the land doesn't transfer over into the goizel or the koine through yeush. So if I steal metaltalin, then it can transfer ownership through yeush, but karka can't. But for really, it's always in the cheskas of the original owner, even after it's stolen. The mikroi nafkalan b'hagoizo basra, some bavakama we learn it out because the perish b'kontras v'adinimo. So Rashi learns out that there's not nikna b'yeush, and the din to Rashi that karka is not nikna b'yeush. Like Tosfot seems to be saying, I mean, people, you go to yeshiva and you learn the karka is not nikna b'yeush, but Tosfot seems to be struggling with this point and saying, Rashi says it's not going to be yeush, and he's right. The yeush moil, because if yeush actually helped, but karka, then my nafka mina, but my de'ena nigzelas, because then what difference does it make? So the Gemara says v'karka eina nigzelas. So what difference does it make if is yeush in karka? If it's before yeush, so even if it was nigzel lokani, so karka eina nigzelas, but it's before yeush. Even if it was stolen, and since it's before yeush, you didn't koine it. The ilacher yeush, hare koine be yeush. So if karka could be stolen after yeush, then it is yeush. So the fact that the Gemara says karka eina nigzelas, there's only a nafkamina to tell you that the yeush doesn't help. So you have this idea that it's a sukkah, because what a sukkah gazula, that it's the Rabbanan say that you're yotze. Rabbi Eliezer says you're not. Misham de karka eina nigzela. Again, this is the tam. This is the reason that's given by the Rabbanan as to why the sukkah is not stolen. So the sukkah is kosher because the karka is not nigzelas, and therefore it's a sukkah she'ula. So the Rabbanan hold that you can be yotze with a borrowed sukkah. And a borrowed sukkah, I go into some guy's sukkah and I just, sit there or eat there. The guy doesn't know about it, but since he still owns the sukkah, I'm not trying to take it from him. I'm yotze with this sukkah she'ula, this borrowed sukkah. So if I steal it and it stays in his rishus, so therefore I never stole it, therefore it's not a sukkah gazula, it's a sukkah she'ula. So I go in and I kick. So how do you steal a sukkah? This is family, sitting down on first night of sukkahs, and you go in there and you kick the family out of their sukkah. So get the hell out of the sukkah, and you kick out the little kids and the wife and the guy, and then you sit in there and then you take in whatever it is. So that's a sukkah she'ula, even though you kick the guy out, since it's still in the reshus of the guy that you took out, because karka eina nigzelas, therefore you're yotze because of a sukkah she'ula. V'adam yotze yidei chaviso b'sukkah shel chavero. Still called his chavero, even though you kicked him out. The hashta. Now, ilifnei yeush ha afilu metaltalin ein nigzalin. So, if this whole thing is before yeush, so the guy's just outside and he's like, all right, I'm going to go to the police tomorrow and get it back. So it's before yeush. So therefore, why are you telling me that karka is in a nigzelet? Even if it's metaltalin, it wasn't karka, you still wouldn't own it. E levadai la'achar yeush, the whole thing's after yeush, and still you are yotze because it's sukkah she'ula. Umihu. But you can't necessarily bring this as a raya, because you could explain it to him. He is a sukkah metaltel could go on. So if the sukkah itself was metaltelin, it wasn't just some boards put up in the middle of the middle of his chotzer or whatever. Could go on shehoitzi mesukkah shebarosh ha'agala. So he's trying to be moitzi. He kicked out his friend from his sukkah, and the guy's sukkah was at the top of an agala, so he put a sukkah on the top. So he has it's a traveling sukkah. That's like the caravan type. So you have this, your sukkah on a caravan. You bust open the roof of your caravan and you put suskach on it. So that's metaltalin. You can steal it. So barush agala or barush safina. So you put your sukkah on a ship. Lo haye yotzeba ben kodim yesh ben la'achar yesh. Mishum, because we mimayed it in the parak, they changed the girsa to parak yashan, midektiv lecha gabi sukkah. So since it says lacha gabi sukkah, so therefore it has to be yours in order to be yoitzi. So lacha, what's lacha in the posuk? The hoitzi is to take out the gazula. So the gazula, meaning that if you steal it, you're not yoitzi. If you steal a sukkah on top of a ship, so then taka that's a stolen sukkah, and you're not yoitzi because it says lacha. Because if the sukkah is metaltalin, you taka stealing the whole sukkah. But the karka itself is not nigzel. But lifnei yeush nami lo chashiva kshaula. And before yeush, it's also, so even before Yesh, it's not like Sha'ula. Even though before Yesh, it's still in the Rishus of the Baal. The Metaltalin and Nigzalin lav Rishus Baalim Kaimi. Because even though we're saying that by Karka it stays in the Rishus of the Baal, by Metaltalin, even before Yesh, it's not in the Rishus of the Baal. Therefore, if I steal the guy's sukkah and I'm in his sukkah, again, I steal the sukkah, say it's in a caravan, and I drive away in his caravan, even though it's before Yesh, it's not in his Rishus because it's Metaltalin. And again, the reason it's not his rishus, like he's up to the point of which it's stolen from him. So now he should have yeush at a later point. Aval karka becheskes baile omedes, but the karka is always staying by the case of by the baal, not like metaltalin. So even after yeush, then you're able to be yotzi with this karka because the karka stays in the cheskes of the balas omedes. Yesh ledadek me'adetani becheskes abatim. Macharlo is a bias macharlo. So we said we can't learn it from there because maybe it's taka a stolen sukkah. But here, we can learn it from this case in Bava Basra. Macharlo is a bias, macharlo sadeh. So if you sold him these things, which are karka, ein me'edlo aleya. So the Gemara is going to get into what exactly the case is. So the guy who sold it can't give edus on the guy who bought it when an urur comes and says it's not his. Machar lo para, machar lo talis, me'ed lo aleya. So if I sell a cow or I sell a talis, I can say, yeah, it belongs to the guy who I sold it to. Umukila, so what's the case? So Reuven gazal sadeh mi Shimon. So Shimon is the original Baal, and Reuven stole it from him. And Reuven then sold it to Levi. And comes Yehuda, V'kama'ara, and he says that it was never, so the error says it would never belong to Shimon in the first place. So Shimon was the original owner, Reuven stole it from him, sold it to Levi, so Levi is now on the field. Yehuda now comes and tries to kick Levi off and says it would never belong to Shimon in the first place. So Shimon comes and says, yeah, it belongs to Levi, because once he says it belongs to Levi, so then he can get it back because Reuven stole it from him. So Shimon wants Levi to have it. So then, because he can't get it back from Reuven, because Reuven is the Gazlan. So Reuven sold it to Levi, so he'll get it out in Beis Din at a Levi, and then Levi has to go to Reuven. So he wants Levi to have it. So therefore, we don't. He's not Sheikh B'Dovar. He's Naga B'Dovar, and therefore he can't give edus that Yehuda it doesn't have shaykhs to the land. But when it comes to the para, since the para he can't get it back. So therefore, he can give edus on it because Levi, if he sold the parah to Levi, if Reuven then stole the cow from Shimon and sold it to Levi, now Levi is the muchzak in it, and then Shimon can say that it's Levi's and not Yehuda's, but not when it comes to karka because he can get it back.
This is just like a derabanan din on edus.
Well, he's Naga B'Dover. I should say he's Naga B'Dover. So since he's Naga B'Dover by karka, but he's not Naga B'Dover because it's good for Shimon that Levi gets the karka, but it doesn't make any difference to Shimon if Levi gets the cow or not. So therefore, I can believe him when it comes to a cow. I can't believe him when it comes to karka because I want Levi to get it because then I get it. Because maybe the taka was Yehuda's. And really, the fight's between Yehuda and Shimon. So when Shimon says that Levi owns it, Shimon's trying to get it back out of Levi himself, and he doesn't want Yehuda to anywhere near it. But if it's a cow, he says it's Levi's, and Levi will keep the cow. So therefore, I can believe him by the cow, but I can't believe him by the karka. The lo lezel Shimon is a hude and give edus on Levi that it says the nichale to Reuven, the hadra that it returns to Levi and then goes back to Shimon himself. Val paravitalis lo hadri. But the talis doesn't go back to Shimon to have a yerush, shinui rishus. So therefore, since he's got the yerush and the shinui rishus, therefore Shimon can't get it back. So therefore, the para So mashma behedia the karka lo mahani yeyush. So there, that's so only from the case of Bava Basra here do we have a raya that karka is in nigzelas. The kloimar eino konen legzavim b'shum yeyush, and that's what he's proving from Bava Basra, and that's what's coming here. So once he's proved it, we can bring it in kol tor kula. The key tema mishom de kasavar yeyush kadi lo kani. So here v'shini rishus lo shaykh b'karka. So Taisus is saying maybe it's not not a proof. Because maybe the whole reason is that we're told that Yesh doesn't work, and the Shini Rishut doesn't work by Karka because time of the Yesh. So the Shini Rishus is just that again, if somebody Tyson will get into later called Sheka, where land is known to be owned by somebody. So even if someone else is there, it's still known as whoever's land. So it's not Shini Rishus even if someone is there. Ha taima to yesh lo kani. So the whole reason, so this is like a yisoid here, that the whole reason that yesh is lo kani kadi. So we have this whole thing. Is yesh by itself enough? So he said the whole reason that yesh is not enough by itself is because the beisra ata liyade. Because it came to in his hand. Beisra. So if I steal something, it comes into my rishus through something that's osir. Since it's now osir in my hand, I can never own this. And I need something else, some other shinoi in order to do it. Can refarish maruba. The hakika bekarka nami kavar nitaish kaidim shehachzik ba halokeach. But here there's already yesh. So in the whole case we have with Shimon and Levi, so it's stolen by. So Shimon gets stolen by Reuven. So Reuven now has it, and then he sells it to Levi. So there's already yeush. By the time he sells it to Levi, there's already yeush. So therefore, when it comes into Levi's hand, it didn't come to Levi be'isr because there was already yeush on it. So we're only saying that when you buy, so if you pick something up on the street before Yeush, a Shabbos Aveda, if you pick it up before Yeush, now it came to your hand be'isr because you have to give it back to him. If you pick it up after Yeush, it doesn't come to your hand be'isr, you can keep it. So only when it comes to your hand be'isr do you have the problem of that then Yeush is not koine. So Mishum be'isr have to here, the karka, we already have the Yeush of Shimon before it comes kodem shechakzik ba halokech before Levi, like by the Parah and Talis. And how do we know that there has to be in the case of the karka? How do we know that it has to be that there's already yeush on it? Maybe Shimon has not had yeush because we're talking about the case of the Parah, and since the Parah he will own completely by Levi. How did Levi completely own the Parah? Because there is yeush before it came to the hand, and therefore. Also to by the Parah and the Talis, it came to his hand, and therefore we prove from here that there's no Yeush by Karka Bakal. So by Yerushalmi, the Kalayim, Sof Perek Shavi, Mashma Yesh Yeush Karka. So now he's going to bring some of this. Yerushalmi kind of goes against what he's saying because we asked the question, Yesh Karka Nigzelas. So he's going to get into the case of the Kalayim in the Yerushalmi, but the Gemara asks, can karka be stolen? And Amar Rabbi Levi, afalpi can yesh karka. So Tosfot needs to understand these words yesh karka that the Yerushalmi says after explaining there's no such thing as yesh karka. Umihu yesh yashev. So go into the whole thing. So he's going to explain really this yesh karka doesn't mean what it looks like it means. To the oilam ein yesh. There isn't. Vele isra de rabbanim mishum kalayim ayri. So we have this this extra chumrah of the Rabbanin are putting Yeush on the Karka in order to create this Isser Kalayim de Rabbanin, and then we'll get the case. Ditnan, Asam, in the Mishnah. Ha'aynes, Shizara es a Kerem. So Aynes is somebody who works without permission. So he goes into, so A has a Kerem, and B goes in without his permission, and he starts planting Zera in the Kerem. And A is not happy about this. But B either does it without his knowledge, or B does it against his will, and he's more powerful. But B comes in and he's zera the kerem. So now once that zera grows, you have the kalayim in the kerem and everything's aser. V'yaitse milifanav. So now the Aynes has left us, and he just leaves the field, and it's growing the zera in the kalayim in the kerem. Kotzro. He's allowed to now, the owner of the field of the kerem is allowed to cut it. Afilu b'moyed, even during the moed. So even though it's not necessarily a davar she'avod, so in order to get rid of the kalayim, that's called a davar she'avod, and during chol hamoed, he's allowed to cut it, to cut it and to remove the zera from the kerem. Ad kama noitin lepolim. How much does he have to pay the workers? Ad shlish, until a third. Yoter mikam, more than a third. Koitzer kadarko. He just does it himself. So if you pay people to do it, it will be done quicker. So you have this isser of kalayim. So therefore, get rid of the isser as quick as possible. But you don't have to pay them at shalish. Again, polim don't work during the moed, and you want to pay them, you have to get extra wages. So again, if anyone works the chol moed, they should be getting extra pay. So if you get even more than that, then just do it. Even if it takes so long that even after the mode, he's still trying to get rid of the kalayim. He doesn't have to hurry up and pay people. When is a guy called an oines? Misha yeshka. Misha yishka. So Misha yishka means that sheka is that it sinks. So Misha yeshka, it means here that the title to the land, or the ownership of A, gets buried, and people stop remembering that A owned the land, and now B, the oines, people think that he owns the land. So Misha yishka is that the people forget who originally owned it, and now it's like they all think that the new guy owns it. And there's nothing really to do with Yeush, and nothing really to do with who owns it. It's just that now people forget that A originally owned the land, and now it's like an even higher level of Yeush of that A's never getting his land back. Amrinan Allah Abba Gemara, the Yerushalmi. Abba Bar Yaakov b'shem Rabbi Yochanan Kini Matnitin. So Kini Matnitin means this is the parish of the Mishnah. Motor lekotzer, it's motor that you can cut it a fila b'moed. Ad kama yeh noitin lepolim. So again, this is the Yerushalmi explaining the Mishnah. Ad shalish, because Tosfot is now going to explain this Gemara. Ad shalish. Rav Huna Rav Sheshes Chadamar ad shalish l'schar. So what does shalish mean? That you have to give a third of their usual wages. If their wages are usually, you have to pay them 100 a day, so only pay them up to 133 a day, and more than that you don't have to pay them. Chadamar ad shalish l'damim. So dam is the value of the field. So if the value of the field is 1,000, so you have to pay up to 333 for the whole thing. Me'emasai nikra oines misha yishka when his name gets lost. Amar Rabbi Acha shenishko habaylim v'lonit aisu. So what does it mean? So you have nishtaku habaylim, so that we forget, everyone in the area forgets that A owned the land, v'lonit aisu, but the original baylim A still hasn't had yeush on the land. Then it's oiserin davar Torah. So it's an iser deraisa. Nitaishu abaylim v'lo nishka oiserim medivrei soifrim. So if he had yeush and they didn't have, and people still remember that A owns it, then it's only also medivrei soifrim. So again, here this idea here that you see clearly in the Gemara that it's only an iser divrei soifrim. Why? What is this idea of nitzis baylim v'lo nishka v'lo nishtako? So why is that like a thing? Also Madrei Seifrim, so this Yeush should just mean that B owns the land, but you see it doesn't, because it's not an Isser Deraisa. Gemara continues, V'yesh karka, Nigzelis, can you steal karka? Amar Rabbi Levi, Afol can yeshli Yeush karka. But that Yeush karka only affects a Isser Madrei Seifrim as opposed to a Isser Divrei Torah, which you get with the Yeush. You get Yeush karka. It's Isser Deraisa. So lo nitaichu, when there's no, you still get this deraisa. Okay, if it is, because if nobody can alter something belonging to somebody else, therefore B comes in and he plants zera in A's field, he can't alter it. So therefore it can't be an isser deraisa unless A loses the field. Ad kan Yerushalmi. The Hachi Perushus. So now Tosfot is going to give an explanation of the Yerushalmi, which Rabbi Yochanan gave an explanation of the Mishnah. Motor lekotzro afilu b'moed the melacha asro. So this melacha is also on the chol hamoed. Chutz mitavar avod. So therefore we get this heter that you can cut it because we have this isser kalayim, and this is then called the davar avod. So icher po'oilem afilu derech pirsum. So you can even Persuma, you can even announce that you're looking for people, which you can't generally do. But koitzer, and you can cut it down, cut down the cut down the zera that's in there and clean it out, so it's not a climb anymore. Ubezarias ha'oines lo neser hakerem. But when the oines plants it, the kerem's not aser. Why? To ein adam oiser davar she'ein shelo, because B can't alter something that belongs to A. V'noitin lepolo ad shalish l'sachar hayinu shemarbe lehem b'shichrus. You have to give them more than their usual wage. Again, if it's 100, give them 130. Shalish shalish yoter mimasha hayiroi liten lehem. Whatever they usually. Again, roi, it's not what they're asking for. What it's proper wages. Kada amar Rav Huna b'perakama. The mitzvah ad shalish. So here it's like a mitzvah ad shalish. So therefore, here we have an isser. It's like the isser ad shalish. You have to pay this value to get rid of the isser ad shalish. Umanda amar l'damim hayinu shenoitin lehem shalish shavim shel kol haperu. So all the kerem, which is now aser. So let's say the vine is now worth 1,000 if it was cleaned up. So you have to give 300 in order to clean up all the value of the kerem. Aval yoter mikan lo yisef, but you don't have to give more than that. V'koitzer kedarko v'lo yiskar. And then so if everything's too expensive, then you just go along your way. You don't have to pay anyone to help you. Afilu la'achar amod, even achar amod, you don't have to. Where people are more willing to work, you don't have to pay extra. Me'im Masai nikra shem oines ala kerem. So when is it called an oines? Lichashev keshelo sheyiser bezurisa, that you will think that it's his. So that once B, the oines, owns the field, sheyiser bezerio, then he can now also deraisa with his zera, because it's his field, and he's not trying to also someone else's, he's trying to also his own. Mishiyishka shem bailim, when people forget that it was ever belonged to A. Bailim emenu, v'nikra al shem ha'oines, and therefore it's called B's field. Therefore P, shalonit aishu a bailim, and even though the original bailim, because the law amru vaile lechesron kes, they never said it, we never heard it. The anan savri de miyoshi, so we never heard them do it. But mistama, they're gonna have yeosh anyway. Once it's called B's field, mistama, it's gonna be he'll have yeosh on it. Vefilu amri de lo miyashi, even if you ask them, do you have yeosh in the field? No one. It's now called B's field. Nasa ketzevach al sefinaso. He is done as somebody who's crying on his boat. So his boat, someone comes and tells him, "Yeah, your boat got sunk, and it's in the water." And he says, "No, it's all my stuff. Anyone touches my stuff, it's all theft. I'm not giving up on it. So that's all. I'm going to go to the bottom of the sea and I'm going to get my stuff. That's all nonsense. Shetevesh biyam. So it's sunk in the water, and that's so. Even though he says he doesn't have yesh, that's called yesh. So you have so again this safina so sheteva b'yam. So the guy's saying I'm not mityayish on it. That since it's like you are mityayish on it, you're never going to find it in the sea. Like even if you found your stuff in the sea, it's just a mikra. There's no way you're going to get your stuff back. And this din, just as a side point, is a big sfar when it comes to like stuff on the internet, like MP3s or movies or books or whatever it is. That even if the owner of it says you have to pay for it and you're not allowed, to download my stuff off the internet, that's like crying on the Safina Social Tevabiyan. Since most people, I don't know what the statistics are. If you have, I don't know, for every 100 people that pays for a movie online, how many people take it for free? I don't know. I'm guessing it's a lot more, but I don't have the statistics. But basically, you have this idea that you're saying I'm not mityayish on my boat that's sunk in the water. Well, tough. There is yevish on it. Umitasra deraisa. So you have an isra deraisa because basically it becomes B's field, and therefore when B plants there, it becomes an isra deraisa. Bezrius ha'oines. So when he plants there, it's like he's planting in his field. But if there's Yeush of B and you hear, of A says, Oy li lechesron kis, but the even still knows that his field is not Isser Deraisa. The Karka Eina Negzalus, because you can't steal Karka. Ava midarabonin aser. But when we're still going to aser the Zera of Perach, the Eish Karka Negzalus. But how can you steal the Karka Kleimer, li Isser, Afilu midarabonin? So we're holding in the question: is karka really stolen? That you can aser it midrabanan and mishamim deyes yesh yeush laaser midrabanan mishom kalayim. So there's an extra chumrah. It's not that the rabbanan it's stolen. It's that there's an extra chumrah when it comes to kalayim, that the rabbanan are making it as if it's stolen in order to have an iser chumrah bit kalayim. And this is only in kalayim, but in general there is no yeush in karka even for an iser rabbanan. Aval midaraisa and yeush midalo aser midaraisa. Umihu heka de nishka shem bailim afilim midaraisa yesh yeush. So here he's linking again the sheka of the name. He creates a yeush because even if he's not miyayish, I don't really care because it's like his ship is sunk in the river. Midahavi isurei davar Torah. So that's Tosfos basically bringing up that we have this issue in the Yerushalmi that says that there is Yehush in Karka, and Tosfos explaining that really it's only an Issur D'Rabbanan when it comes to Kalayim, it's a special Chumrah of Kalayim, but it's not Mikra Din, and there is no Yehush in Karka. V'od yesh lefaresh be'inyan acher. We can also explain it in another way. Shenishkachu ha'bailim. So he's going to reject this at the end, but this is just another way to explain the Gemara there in Yerushalmi. So that's all an Isur D'Oraisa. Lo machmas deris oinus. It's not because of the oinus was planting there. It says Eila shahalach lo ha'oinus. The oinus went there. Then v'nishar hakerem lifnei habanim. So the oinus disappeared, and then the kerem was there lifnei habailim. So then he planted the stuff, and the bailim were in control of the karka. V'lo akar mimenu hakalayim. So he knew that the kalayim was there, and he never got rid of the kalayim. V'haisef me'atayim. So this is the din of kalayim that has to grow 1 200ths of the current ratio. So it added 1 200ths. Isru davar Torah. So then the isur becomes an Isur D'Oraisa. Machmas ha'bailim. Because that's because nothing to do with the oinus. Because of the bailim shemakaimim kalayim. So there's a different din of the oines planted the zeraim, and he can't alter it, but the owner makaimim the kalayim because he never got rid of it, and since he never got rid of it, so he's got the isser of kalayim deraisa because he's makaim the kalayim dedaihu. Have a kaven kalayim dedehu have it's his kalayim kaven to lo nitaishu. He didn't have yeush and it was his. Aval nitaishu v'lo nishkachu midirabanan. So if he had yeush on the karka, so therefore it's like it's not his. V'ika Pirche, so it's an Isur D'Rabbanan then in that case. The Eka Pirche Toiva L'Loshin Zeh V'Rishon Eker. So there's lots of things you can question on that, and therefore the first Peshat he gave is the Eker Peshat, but there is this other explanation. It was second Orla, Perakama, Tanya. So now we're getting into Orla. Tanya B'Yerushalmi, B'Shem Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Noita L'Rabim Chayiv. So if you plant for the Rabim, you're Chayiv in Orla in Yinoita B'toch Shelo, if you plant in your own field, your own chatzar. But if you plant in the Rishus Rabim, then you're potter from Orla. So if you plant for the Rabim, you plant for the Rabim in the Rishus Rabim, you're potter. And we say, so what's this Rishus Rabim? You're planting the Rishus Rabim, it's Gazal Karka, because you're guzzling the Karka. V'yesh Karka Nigzelas, as the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Eloi. Afilu afal pi she'ein karka nigzelas yesh yesh the karka. So even though you don't steal the karka, there's yesh in the karka. V'kula milta tamua. The whole Yerushalmi doesn't make any sense. So again, we have the same issue because we're saying that there's yesh yesh the karka. The whole thing doesn't make any sense. The ha matnisan dahasam katani hagazlin shenata chayiv. So we have in the Mishnah. Why are we asking from the Brisa? The Mishnah itself over there says the gazlin who plants is chayiv. So why do we ask from the Mishnah? Why are we asking from the Brisa? And also, my kaperach a Brisa, the yesh karka nigzelas. Why are we asking the yesh karka nigzelas? The mashma misham the nigzelas, the yesh yehush potter mena arla. It's mashma that why we potter from the arla because it was nigzul and there's yehush. Because if it's nigzul and there's yehush, you'd be chayiv. Why does that make you potter from arla? Adarabba because yesh lechayiv benoita letoch shelo. Because if the whole thing is that the karka is nigzeles, and therefore that there's yerush lekarka, and I planted in the rabim, so then you noite le rabim, bereshus rabim, then why? Because I stole the karka and there's yerush, and therefore they gave it to me. That's called the tok shalom, and therefore you should be chayiv in the orla. V'od midami noite bereshus rabim legozol karka. Why are you comparing planting the shus rabim to stealing the land? V'nitza v'hayinu below yeush, and the planting that's below yeush dumia de reshus rabim. So for the planting that's like below yeush is like the reshus rabim to ein shaykh bo yeush. So there's no yeush in this reshus rabim, and we're comparing. We're saying that it's a betoch shelo connected to reshus rabim because I can't own this and this I can own. So the whole thing doesn't make any sense. The ein shaykh bo yeush. For in me to kind of so basically at this point I was just saying this whole Gemara in the Yerushalmi just doesn't make any. Can't make any sense out of it. So ve'im mitzkana. So if you want to fix it up, I want to have like a different girsa there. I want to say that taka. It's a tos in the brisa. He to yesh yush that there is yesh. Not in tzricha leokma kushenishko shema bottom. So you have to say that. How are you going to fix it up? The taka there is yesh on the whole thing is where it's the name of the karka is sheka. So he has this confusing Gemara in Orla. It doesn't really answer up. It seems to be saying that there's yesh the karka, but the whole Gemara and many questions he's asking on the whole Gemara doesn't really make any sense. So Tosfot is holding that when it says that karka ain't nigzela, it means that there's no yesh b'karka. Again, that's the whole Rashi. That's what Rashi says, and it doesn't seem to be such a big chiddush, but that's the whole point of the Tosfot. Rashi says it. It seems like that's the truth, and karka ain't nigzela means there's no yesh b'karka, or yesh doesn't work on karka. So ki kavni avankhari. So when they gazazoo, when they cut off the branches. Nami nihi yesh bailim b'didaihu didei. So there's yesh at the time when they cut them off. So he says im tema hahu yesh shalomidas who the lo yada bei nigzel belokeach. So Tosfos has a question here. So when the avankhari, or we're saying that the mestama the goy is stealing the land, and therefore the avankhari when the seller shouldn't go take it themselves. They should get the land, whoever's on the land, the goyim themselves to cut it. So, because whoever the goy is selling them the stuff, they're robbers. So when the goy cuts off the hadas, then the original owner of the field doesn't know that he's cutting the hadas, and therefore it's a yerush lomidas. Yerush lomidas is where there's yerush. If he had known it was taken, he would have yerush. But since he doesn't know it was taken, he doesn't have yesh, so it's yesh lo midas. The kaimalam bereish elu mitzius, the famous maklokis of Bai and Rava, yesh lo midas lo have yesh. So since yesh midas lo have yesh, so therefore it's not going to help. Now I'm cutting it off. Who cares? Yishlomer de lo mikri yesh shalom midas. It's not called yesh lo midas. So here it's a different case of. It's not a case of yesh lo midas. Why? Ella hechet de ba leyado kodem sheyada habaylim shenevad mehem. So here, the Baal knew a long time ago that the Goy stole his land. So therefore, it's Nevad Mehem. It's Nevad from the original owner. So this isn't called Yesh Lo Midas. Aval Haka Yada Bey. He knows that it was taken from him. And it is Nevad Mehem. And he knows that it's gone. But it Yeshu Mikodem, he's had Yesh on the karka, Eila de ein Yesh la karka. It's just there's no chalas of the Yesh on the karka, and therefore when he cuts off the hadas, then now chal the Yesh on the hadas immediately. There was already Yesh beforehand. So now it's Yesh B'das because he knows that the land is stolen, and he knows that everything will be shown off and stolen and sold off. So there's like a yerush hovering over the land, and it can't chal on the karka. But then once you cut off from the karka, then it chals on that, and therefore you have yerush and shinui rishus, and all is good. So again, this isn't a tema in Tosfos; it's an im tema, so it's not such a big kasha and a simple teretz. Shinui החוזר לברייתו lo shemei shinui. So in the Gemara, you're telling the Avankhari, the sellers who are Jewish, that they should get the goyim to cut the hadas off the tree, and then they'll have it'll be theirs with the shinui rishus. And he says, well, why don't we just have a shinui, let them themselves take it off the tree, and they'll have a shinui without being a shinui rishus, which will be a shinui maisa. And then we say this isn't a shinui maisa because it goes back to the way it was. So we're talking about binding up, we're tying up the lulav. So you just untie the lulav. So Tosfos here starts off with that a shinui החוזר לברייתו, that the shinui you make and then it just goes back to the way it was. It's a kinyan d'Rabbanan, and we'll have to really see what the hell is he talking about here. What is this kinyan d'Rabbanan? It's problematic later, but right now It just means that he has it's not a kinyan deraisa, it's a kinyan derabanan. Kadisa bereisha gazal kama. And how do I know it's a kinyan derabanan? Because if you see at the beginning, it says if you steal some wood, but gazal eitzim, that you're koina. So why they say why you koina? He says because, it's when you pay the damages. So you pay that you're not koina, because but you're koina midrabanan that you will pay from the shasa gazela. So you stole mishupin, so you stole the wood. You didn't steal a 4x2 or a 4x4. You didn't steal a big thing of wood and then make it into a kli. You stole already sanded down kagon nesarim, and then the asan kalim. Now the kli and the wood they're talking about here are like smooth bits of wood that you put together to make a kli, and then you just take it apart and they're back to the way they were. Because if you've had a nice neser, a nice log that's all sanded down, and you carve out a nice bowl into it or something, that's not a choizer lebriaso. But here that you can, the Gemara itself says that you can dismantle it yourself. So here, you have just the pieces of wood, and then you put it together to make a kli, and then you dismantle it. So it's choizer lebriaso. So even that is koina, where you pay kashas gazela. So keva midabaraisa. So therefore, in our case, since the raisa, you are not koina. You are not koina the lulav. Therefore, lo nafik is not called lechem, and you're not yotze haka. So there he's making a chiluk between the midarabanan. You are yotze, and the midaraisa you're not yotze. So that's all good. So basically, Tosfot is asking the question. We're saying lav shemei shinoi. We see there's a kinyan in Bava Kama. That's a kinyan midarabanan, but here we need a kinyan deraisa, which you don't have with the sheet with a choizer lebriaso. Umihu mahahi savta. So later on in our parak we have that the Reish Galusa was his evodim were stealing schach wood from this woman, and you turn it into the schach. And this woman was a Rav Nachman, and starts screaming at him. Mashma the gabi sukkah the nafik. So by sukkah, so now Tosfot asking the question, why, if I take wood, put it on a schach, I take the wood off the schach, and now it's wood again. So it's a choizer lebriaso. So therefore, why by sukkah is it a kinyan that you're yotze the mitzvah, but by lulav it's a kinyan you're not yotze the mitzvah. As afogav the lo kani ela mitam marish. So your kaina is only because. So why is he kaina? He's going to be mitam marish. Now marish is a tekanas rabbanan, that tekanas hashavim. That when somebody is doing teshuvah, if he stole a piece of wood and he built a house around it, and then he does teshuvah. So he stole it. So he's a ganef. 10 years later, he becomes a Baal Tshuva. He goes to the rabbi and he says, "I did all this thievery. What do I do?" He says, "Well, you got to give it back." And so he looks at his house. He sees it's got a big beam there, and he's like, "Well, it's going to cost me a lot of money to do teshuvah. I'm going to lose my house, so I won't bother doing teshuvah." It's like I went to make aliyah. And they said it's going to cost me. I have to turn up the next day after Aliyah. I have to give them a check for like 20,000 shekels. So I didn't make Aliyah until I got out of that issue. But the tekanas hashavim. So people will do teshuvah that you don't have to return the marish. So you get this kinyan on the marish. So now here that's in. So it's a tekana rabbanan. So at this stage of Tosfos, they're both kinyan to rabbanan. You have the kinyan of the kinyan of the Morish is only because of a takana, so therefore it's a kinyan to Rabbanan. And we have a kinyan midrabanan of a Shinוי choizer lebriaso. So how do you answer this? What's the answer? Hata mishum takanas hashavim v'haka ba'agudas lolav ba'alma lo shayach takanas hashavim. So this answer of Tosfot doesn't really make any sense here. What exactly is he saying here? Hasam, so over there has become takanas hashavim. Takanas hashavim what? That you koine deraisa. So now, seemingly, you have to be koine deraisa in order to be yotze your sukkah. So Tosfot is saying that takanas hashavim you're koine deraisa. The haka, but by our case, with the lulav, it's okudas lulav ba'alma lo shayach takanas hashavim. So that when you have a lulav that you just tied up, so you're not going to stop you doing teshuvah. Deneko lahater la aguda. So just take it apart and then give back whatever you stole, and then it won't stop you to do teshuvah. So, but this is still a kinyan d'Rabbanan. This tekanas hashav, tekanas is Rabbanan tekanas. So how does this become a tekanas d'Oraisa? So the Mepharshim say that here it's you have based in hefker based in hefker. That's a proper kinyan. So here it's called a kinyan. He's kani because the hefker based in hefker because of the tekanas hashavim. But when it comes to the agudas lolav, there is no tekanas of the rabbanan of the basin don't get involved. So since there's no lo shaykh tekanas hashavim, since there's no tekanas of hashavim, so therefore there's no hefker based in hefker, and therefore your kinyan is only to rabbanan, and it's not the raisa because it's not a tekanas hashavim. It's tekanas hashavim and hefker based in hefker, which is a kinyan to raisa. Now there are some mefarshim explain here that Tosfot is chayzer from his original thing, the afagav dekani midrabanan. They hear Tosfot has completely flipped and says lo shak dekanas hashavim because it's nekel lahatir good, so therefore he's not koine b'chlal. So Tosfot is just dropping this whole thing, and there is no kinyan d'Rabbanan. That's the second teretz, but the first teretz is definitely more simple. That just you're koine d'Rabbanan here and over there you're koine d'Oraisa. So obviously here's a question. So when I cut the hadas off its tree, lo chashiv shina maisa. Why is that not a shina maisa? I mean, it should be that's a huge shina maisa. It was a tree, now it's a branch. Kevin de lo nishtane shemo bekach. I just gave a change of a name. De miyikara asa v'hashta asa. So that there's no Shinoi Hashem because it was a hadas on the tree, and then you did the Shinoi Maisa, and then hadas off the tree. So now he has to prove that when you have a Shinoi Maisa without a Shinoi Hashem, that it doesn't koina. Kadashachan bereish gazul kama. Hi, the gazul dikla michavre. He stole an entire date tree from his friend. The katila, and he chopped it down. Even though that he put the decal into his own field, so he's cut it and he's got a shina rishus. Lo kani, he didn't make a kinyan on it. Why not? He's got a shina maisa. My time at dimikara dikla mikri hashanami dikla mikri. So since there's no shina Hashem to do with the shina maisa, even though he chopped it down and brought it into his own field, we see he's not koina. So therefore, with the shina maisa, you need to have a shina Hashem as well. If I have the posuk lechiyusa gara, now here he's running into problems here because the Gemara, he's just bringing a stira in the Gemara, but he's saying that with the cutting down. So when you posuk lechiyusa, that you chop down the life off the tree, is like much worse of a shinoi michashecha from just weakening something to lo hadar. So when you have a weakness that doesn't return. So it says there that you koine it, that if you steal a cow and then you have a weakness that doesn't return, obviously it gets weaker and it can get fat again if you weaken to the point that it's not going to get better. That's koine. Or me behema vehezikna techashiv. So you have a behema and it gets old. Techashiv shinoi. So getting old is a much worse shinoi than basically dying. That's all considered a shinoi. Afokab lo nishna shemam, even though the names didn't change. Umeshalim keshasa gazela. Again, all these gemaras are coming from Bava Kama, and Bava Kama where it's a shinoi we care about. If you pay like you pay now, you pay keshasa ha gazela. So this is all. So really, it should be a shinoi maisa, but it's not because it's a worse shinoi than if it just gets weak or if it gets old, because that's choshev shinoi, even though the lo shanei shemam. So when he's saying we have these shinois, it doesn't have a shinoi Hashem, that is koine, and here we have a bigger shinoi without a shinoi Hashem, it's not koine. The kain eitzim, so to eitzin v'shafim, and you sand them down. Evan v'sisasam, you get evan and you round them, you make them softer or less sharp. Semer v'libam, and you whiten it. Bereisha goes kam. All those things are koine, and yet you chopping down the tree is a bigger shinoi, and none of these have a shinoi Hashem. And yet they're koine and this isn't. And Tosfot doesn't really explain why that is. He just tells you that, even though, he says you're not koine, even though this is that cutting off the life is a worse shinoi, it seems to be a bigger shinoi than all these other ones. Those ones are koine, this one isn't. Well, that's kind of obviously leaving as a kasha, well, why the hell not? And he's just left us hanging. So comes the Orech Laner. So Gerim Mechashot Lo Hadar, a tam. He's going to give us a tam. Yeshlomer Desham Shinoi Nase Hadavar Atzmo. So the goof of the etzim of the Maisa itself, so the cow itself, was Kichesha Orka older, or the Evan itself changed. The Nicker bull, and there it's also Nicker in the cow, whatever, that has a Shinoi. Well, Haka Shinoi Lo Nase Bedikla. But the decal itself was not, there was no change in the decal. Shebedekel Atzmo B'Shashe Nixtas Ein Lahakir Shinoi. So even in the decal, when you chop it down, you can't. If you look at the decal, you can't see there's a shinoi because it's just chopped. So you have basically a healthy. Obviously, if you look at the roots were attached and now they're not. But if you look at the tree itself, let's say you take a picture of the tree, you can't tell that it's been uprooted because even though you've cut off its life, sofil hishtanos yoter. It'll look terrible in a year's time or whatever, however long it takes to dry up. Right now, there's not so much of a shinoi if you look at the health. So therefore, in Toysis's cases, you have where these are all begufadover, therefore it's a shinoi, and it's a shinoi that's koina. But here we do a shinoi, and it's not a shinoi in the guf. So again, I have the branch of the hadas, and I cut off the hadas. The hadas is still still a good branch or whatever, and obviously it'll change over time. But there's no shinoi. There's no shinoi in the guf of the hadas there. So then the Gemara says, and koina it with the shinoi Hashem. So it was a hadas, now it's a hashana. Now the Gemara again rejects that this isn't a shinoi Hashem. And if it was a shinoi Hashem, it would be koina, because he says it was a hadas and it's now also a hadas. It just says that originally it was a stam hadas is for the chag. When you walk down the street and you see like a revolt, you see hadas, and you're like, oh, if I had that tree in my garden, I take from it every day for my lulav, because that since they're oimid to put into your lulav, so therefore you already call them the lulav even before they're cut. So it says that first it was a hadas and now it's a lulav, in the lulav branch, the hashana, that's what they call it, all banded up. He says no, already people had their eye on the hadas to put it in, so it's not a shinoi Hashem, but it was a shinoi Hashem, it would be koine. So Tema, Amrinan the shinoi Maisa HaChozer, we just said that the shinoi Maisa HaChozer Libriaso, Lo Shemei Shinoi is not a shinoi, and also who it in B'Shinui Hashem. So Shinui Hashem is going to change back is also not koine. So we just asked that, so why are we asking this? Kadamrinim b'meruba, we say meruba. Gabi the morish, the beam that's built into the house. Shina choiz lebriyoso b'shino Hashem lo shemei shina. So over there, you're not even though there's a shino Hashem, you're not koine it, because again you need the tekanas hashavim to be koine it. You have a shinoi Hashem there. It was a beam, now it's a house, or whatever the Shinoi Hashem is. And it says, no, you're not koine, because since the shame is choiz libriaso, so therefore you're not koine. So it's the same question. So why are we asking? So Rav Yosef over there in Maruba, Taka holds that the Shinoi Hashem, it's nechshav a Shinoi. And therefore you're kind of with the Shinui Hashem, but there's a different reason over there why you're not kind of. That's his other answer. So there, it's a bit of a. It's a bit chiddush to say it's going like Rav Yosef. So when you have a tema, he gives the answer. It's a big chiddush to say that Rav Yosef has to bring you chiddush to Matar. Oh, he's going like Rav Yosef. Like that's a little bit over the top, and we don't see it anywhere in the Gemara. But that's the shita here, but everyone agrees with it. So here it goes a different track. Here you have a Shina Hashem that doesn't have a Shina Maisa with it. You're not koine b'choizer libriaso when they go back to their original way. So both the Shina Maisa and the Shina Hashem both go back to their original thing. They can both go back to just a Stam Hadas branch. Kamo Marish, like the Marish that goes back, it takes out of the house, and now the Shina Hashem has also changed. It's back to being a beam. The Kamoshahu Banai Babaria, that just like it was built in the house, you can take it out. Lo Chashiv Shinoi Maisa. So therefore, it's not called a shinoi maisa. Valhaka da'agdo harei choshev shinoi maisa. But when you tie it up, it's called a shinoi maisa. Bahade shinoi Hashem. So you have the two coming together. Vakani. Afokav da'hader lemilsa. Even though that is coming together. So here he's saying above here that it's a shinoi Hashem that doesn't have a shinoi maisa because the marish doesn't have a shinoi maisa. But here you have a shinoi maisa. Yes, so putting it in the house isn't a shinoi maisa at all. But here you have the eged. So we're saying now we're mechadish in the Gemara that liknei b'shinoi Hashem because you have a shinoi Hashem with a shinoi maisa. Even though they both go back, they can both go back to brioso. That's called a kinyan because it's chashav v'shinoi maisa with the shinoi Hashem. They both come together, and therefore you're koine. Kafut Tamorim, who is the son, I believe, of the Nemuka Yosef. Yeah, so Kashali Tuva al Teretze. So again, Tosfot already has his first teretz, and this is the Odye Shlomer. But the Kavos Tavarim has Kashali Toiva al Teretze. Deharei Gavi Marish Nami Ike Shinoi Maisa. Shabana Babira v'chavru betit. He's already built it into his house. For Adif Mishina Maisa de Lulav. This is a much better Shina Maisa than we have for the Lulav. Dehu Eged Ba'alma. Because all you're doing is putting a little bow on it, so just undo the bow. The gam gave marish ikashino Hashem. The mikarish marish v'hash the gag. So with the marish also have a shino Hashem. So the whole teretz of Tosfos, what the hell are you talking about? What's the difference? So filo hachi amru b'maruba shino Hashem the chozer libriaso lo shemei shinos. We're still calling that the shino Hashem. Im kain harei huva kol shekain haka. Huadin v'kol shekain haka gavi lulav. So how can you make the chiluk for im kain? My perachaka likno b'shinoi Hashem. So why? So if so, why are we asking that here? Afogav de ika shino maisa b'hadei dahainu eged. You have that with it. Lo mahani dumi demarish. We know already that this doesn't work. The lo mahani mishum dechazir lebriyaso. So we've already had this by marish. So our case is marish. Tosfos is making a chiluk between marish and lulav. And the Kafos Tamarim, as you're saying, it's the same. Why you can't learn? What's the chiluk here? B'chal. Mashgazot does a gabi marish leika shini maisa. Hem devurim temuim. They're wonderful words. The hooray hamarish hu the yesh bo shino maisa the b'bana b'bira the chebru b'tit. Because this marish, you put it in the house, it's holding the whole thing up. You put tit around it. The adif mishini maisa de lulav, and therefore it's a much better shini maisa belulav. And here he leaves that as a tzarachian. So again, the whole second teretz of Tosfos is tzarachian because it's that they both got a shini maisa, both got a shini Hashem, and we know that it doesn't work because it says by Marsh it doesn't work. So what's this chiluk you're making? So the second teretz chayra and svara seems to be difficult. So therefore, you have to go back to the first teretz, which is as whole thing's going like Rav Yosef and not like the teretz of I think Zabaya there. So Tosfos continues. Im tema utzba dahasan, kevin delisba kitzua, ve'emba ela machshava. So you have the piece of leather, and you don't even do a shinu maisa, and you just delisba. You didn't cut it, and there's only machshava. You're just thinking about it. I'm going to make this into a tablecloth. This will be now a tablecloth. Therefore, you can just change it, and it's not going to be a tablecloth. It's going to be a shoe. But there we see that he's kind of with machshava. So after just saying that you need the shinoi Hashem, you need a shinoi maisa with it. So why are you kind of here? So here now, Tosfos has this new din where you have a shinoi Hashem with Yeush, you're good to go. Teheka deleka Yeush, ein machshavas metumatzu. How do I know there's Yeush? Because there can't be tuma if there's no Yeush. And here, once he thinks about it, then it becomes a kli, and it's makabel tuma. So you can't bring it to makabel tuma. Kediktami lefi shalonit aishu habailim. So there it says that his machshava cannot metamet because it's not mashai bailim. Therefore, it is because he's able to metama with his machshava after Yeush, and there our case over there is after Yeush. Ve'adif shinu Hashem achozer dekani im Yeush kad ashkan kavi utzba. So now we're going to say that this shinu Hashem achozer that's koina with Yeush is better Mishinui Maisa HaChozer Lברייתו. So the two things, we have a Shinui Hashem, a Chozer, Im Yeush, is Koine, Masha En Kain, Shinui Maisa, Chozer Lברייתו, because if you Im Yeush Lo Kani, because even when you have this even Yeush, you're not Koine with the Kadamaskena Haka. Because here we're saying that you have Yeush on the Hadas, because there's already Yeush on the Karka, which we did on a previous Tosfot. So there's Yeush there. But since it's a Meiser Shechozer Lברייתו, you're not Koine. We see with Shinui Shem you are, so therefore it's better. V'hashta nicha ha de Kamrin Hasam. So over there in Meruba, Shinui Hashem k'Shinui Maisa Dami. So they were saying, we said over there, Shinui Hashem is like a Shinui Maisa Dami. The Hechi Dami lahadadi, because how are you comparing the two? V'halo Shinui Maisa lechuda b'lo Yeush kani so k'nemucha b'kama dochti. So when you have a Shinui Maisa on its own, without Yeush, you're Koina. So how can you compare that to a Shinui Hashem? So we prove it in Meruba, Goizukama, but a Shinui Hashem lo kani ela bahati Yeush k'nemucha hahi de'utzpa. How can you compare the two? This is why we're comparing them. Mishom de utzpa chozer lברייתו, because the Shinui Hashem of utzpa only needs Yeush because it's chozer lברייתו. But where the Shinui Hashem is a good Shinui Hashem and doesn't hadar, kani lechuda dahahi ganav tala v'nasa ayol, because somebody who steals a taleh and it becomes an ayol, egel v'nasa shor, they're all koine, and you pay kashas ha gazela. And there's the sugis in Meruba, and that's just a Shinui Hashem without any Shinui Maisa, and you're koine even without Yeush. But when it's a Chozer, then it needs the Yeush on top. So perach hatam la'ayel velикניוה בשינוי Hashem velo yechashev arba v'chamisha. So it says over there la'ayel in Meruba that they should be koine with the Shinui Hashem, and then if they koine et b'shas ha gazela, then they're not chayev arba v'chamisha. Umishani shor ben yom kari shor ayel ben yom kari ayel. So therefore it's already an ayel to mashma de ilo haki kani b'Shinui Hashem lechuda. So that's the same as our Gemara. That our Gemara isn't a Shinui Hashem. But if it would be a Shinui Hashem, then it would be koine. But it turns out that here it's not a Shinui Hashem. So we're just saying that there is no Shinui Hashem here. But if it would be, it'd be enough to be potter you arba v'chamisha if it was a proper Shinui Hashem. Therefore Shinui Hashem by itself, the chuda is enough to be koine. So now Tosfot does a bit of a sikum. V'hasha yesh kama dinim b'davar. The Shinui. So again, there is Yeush here, and there is a and we're saying it'd be a Shinui Hashem, and that would be koine, but it's not, because there is no Shinui Hashem here. Just so how that fits in. Like our Gemara is not a Shinui Hashem. We ask, let it be koine of Shinui Hashem. The Torah says it's not a Shinui Hashem. Ayin Sham. So there's a few dinim. Shinui Maisa she'ein chozer, v'kein Shinui Hashem she'ein chozer, kani midoraisa. So those work deraisa. We get to go afogab to lo nityash even without Yeush. So that's a Shinui Maisa and a Shinui Hashem that don't chozer, you're koine deraisa, even without Yeush. The Shinui Maisa or chozer koine below Yeush. So if it's a Shinui Maisa chozer below Yeush, it's koine midorabanan. How do I know it's koine midorabanan? Kadamashim barisha goizil kama, and why is that tama misham tekana sashavim? Now we said before here that the Tekana Sashavim was the Hefker Beiskin Hefker, so here you're kind of midorabanan, but it's enough for deraisa, because you're only kinda even brings up the woman here that she's kinda in order to be, or the other people are kinda in order to be yotze the mitzvah of sukkah, but he's saying here midorabanan, but l'chayr the midorabanan it's a Hefker Beiskin. And then it becomes a deraisa. So I have to say that here that he's using that midrabanan. Again, it's hefker based in hefker is used a lot of the time. I said it's rabbanan, but then we'll have a koyach that you'll be able to be kind of deraisa. You have like the rabbanan or oiker kedushin. So if the rabbanan or oiker kedushin, then how can the oiker kedushin deraisa says that it holds? Okay, hefker based in hefker, and then we're hefker the kesef. That's so called the rabbanan are doing it. Year to year the rabbanan, so you have to work with language like that. V'shinui Hashem to hadar lemilta below Yeush, lo kani klal. So when you have a Shinui Hashem that goes back, it's not without Yeush, it's not koine at all. Chutz Mileinin Marish Mishum Takanas Shavim. Outside of this Marish thing that you have, that you are Takanas Shavim is what you're kind of with. So call Binyan Karka V'Kayotze. Now it's not just the Marish. Tosis says it's all Binyan Karka and things like that. And how does Tosis know how to expand? Kudemuchach Shmaisa Dahi Sapta, this woman who's screaming. Titzavach, that she's screaming, saying they've got my. She goes to Beis Din and said they've got my wood. Alma lo nitaisha. Therefore, she hasn't had yeush on her wood. Otherwise, she wouldn't be going to Beis Din saying, "Give it back to me." V'Amar Rav Nachman ein lo ela demei eitzim. And she says you don't get your wood back. So therefore, they were koina it because it's a binyan karka and you have the Takanas Shalvim. Otherwise, you wouldn't just get the demei eitzim to get the eitzim itself back. So you were asking now here we should be kind with the Shinui Hashem. Tikshile Misam the lulav a gazelle. So when you steal the lulav, you should get the Shinui Hashem. That it's again miyakara, it was a dekel or something, and now it's a hoshana. Why are we asking on the hadas? And the teretz would be the same teretz l'chayra, but why don't we ask it on the Mishnah? So we could be making okimta in the Mishnah and say that the Mishnah is only talking about if you stole taka like a dekel branch in achinami, you're yotze on the first day, or even on the second day. For here we're talking about mitzvah ba'avera. But with the Mishnah, why does it say that goyz is apostle? Because you stole the already bound up lulav. That lulav already bound up. There is no shinoi. Delisle lo shinoi shem lo shinoi maisa, and therefore it's possible on the next day. And therefore, that's why we didn't ask from the Mishnah, but we're asking here because the case is clearly that you're taking the hadas branches itself.